Well, ladies and gentlemen, the World Cup is officially upon us. It's been this weird gargantuan boil that's been appearing on our skin for the last 12 years since we learned it was going to be happening in the far east of Qatar. And as much as we've been trying to avoid thinking about it, unfortunately, we have to confront the idea that we are going to have a World Cup in the middle of the conventional football season in the winter for everyone else to have to deal with. Now, it's not the first time that we've had a morally dubious and contentious World Cup. I mean, indeed, I remember the last one that happened in Russia, which was very kind of ominous considering what happened with Russia a couple of years later. Um, Very much the topics of the day where it came to fan safety, especially with the LGBTQ community. But there have been other ones in the past. I mean, we even had to go back a couple of decades to when Argentina hosted it, and it was at the hands of a fascist dictatorship. But this one feels a lot more insidious, unfortunately. And for a small podcast like us that we're not going to ruffle feathers, I would hope, with the Qatari family, but you never know. They are a very insecure bunch. Um, I think it feels like almost we have to kind of talk about why we are going to be watching the World Cup. 'Cause I know for me personally, I know I'd like to be a bit ethical and more about my football as best you can in a sport that's increasingly becoming more corporate and capitalist over time. But this World Cup does feel very, very uncomfortable. And Neil, I think to start off the preview, if you will, of our World Cup discussions, it's probably best to kind of explain why we feel uncomfortable about this particular competition. Why, for me, it doesn't feel like an actual sporting competition. It feels more like a political exercise or even a military exercise, depending on who you read and listen to.
Well, yeah, it's more of a case of it's complete total sports washing, and that's pretty much all it is. It's to put a veneer on what is a horrendously brutal human rights violating regime.
Hmm.
Um, they and also also the deal as well was like just completely the most corrupt thing you've ever seen in your entire life. Like when they
Hmm.
initially made the bid, they had no stadia, and they're just like, "We'll build loads of them."
Yeah.
Um, it's just and then how they built them was they just imported a shitload of migrant labor and quite literally worked loads of them to death, thousands of them to death.
Hmm.
So in essence, the entire World Cup is going to be taking place and even then they didn't get all of the stadia built. I'm like their initial bid was like 12. They've only got 8 of them. Um, so it's weird. You kind of it's the World Cup, right? So it is
Hmm.
literally the pinnacle of the sport that we love, that a lot of us have grown up playing. You want to enjoy it, but it's just wrong. You know, uh, you can't you can't but focus on the fact that this is going to be taking place in a giant Indian burial ground.
Yeah.
Quite
Quite
recent,
literally.
yeah, quite
Yeah.
recent. Uh, Indian burial ground. I don't want to be arguing about how many thousands of migrant workers have been worked to fucking death. I don't want to be thinking about the monstrous disruption to Premier League season for no other reason other than when they gave the World Cup to Qatar, they just didn't think, oh yeah, we'll hold it in the Middle East. Because initially when they got it, it was to be in the summer, it was to be in the normal time frame, and then they were like, oh, what's the temperature in Qatar in the middle of summer? Oh, it's 47 degrees. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, the players aren't going to be able to do that. Well, and then so they just played it over winter. Um, I don't want to be arguing about it. I want to be arguing about, Gareth Southgate's back seven. Um, you know, you know, I want to be, I want to be arguing about penalty shootouts. You know, it's awful, but like they've held it in the country again, yet another country with a horrific human rights record.
Hmm.
And even recently, like Sepp Blatter's come out and said that it shouldn't have been hosted there, and I was like, "Holy shit!" Like having Sepp Blatter tell you that you shouldn't have gotten the World Cup is a bit like being sent down for murder by Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
It's
Like
kind of
he's the
gone.
one that brokered the deal. Like he should not be. It's a bit late for him to be saying these things 10, 12 years after the fact. I know he's just doing it to kind of get some brownie points for whatever PR firms he's with. But that's not the point. Like if you felt so guilty about it, then why did you take the Qatari money? Why did you bow to the supposed political pressure around it? If you were so moral and ethical about it, you wouldn't have given it to them. You would have given it to the US.
Yeah, FIFA
Like you
have
should have.
given up all pretense of being a moral or ethical fucking like um committee, like or a moral or ethical organization. I mean, like, they're just completely detached from reality. I mean, like, Gianni Infantino was asking Russia and Ukraine to pause the war that they haven't. I was like, it's not a war. First off, it's not a war; it's an invasion. You know,
Yes.
a war is when two armies fight each other. you know, um, and he's asking them to pause it. I was like, are you fucking on crack? Like that just shows you when you get to that kind of level of wealth that the quality of drugs are just incredible.
It's not even the quality
Um,
of drugs, it's the quality of disillusion.
yeah, it's just
And
so
that's
it's
exactly what this
so
is. Like it's the disillusion the World Cup in a
you know.
nutshell.
But that's the thing. Like, there's so much about this World Cup to possibly love. It's going to be Messi's swan song, and according to FIFA, he's going to win it.
Hmm.
Sorry, that's the FIFA football game,
Game, yeah.
not anything
You
else.
do know that the World Cup is fixed already, but we don't
It's
know the winner
fixed
yet.
already. It was fixed by the programmers at EA, not
Yeah,
anything else. They're the real
exactly.
fucking Machiavellian bastards behind all of this. Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Messi's swan song. The fact that this Argentina team seem to have actually gotten its shit together, and they've done this thing called balance.
Hmm.
Rather than just front loading the team, hoping to blast everybody away. But no, actually, they realize stopping the opposition from scoring goals might be a good thing, and they've managed to get in like a brilliant goalkeeper and a brilliant defender, a couple of brilliant defenders actually. You know, I want to talk about the fucking excellent Brazilian team now that looks really fucking good.
Yeah.
They might make this number six. They really, 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 or is it six or
Yeah.
something? Yeah,
Seven.
six, seven, seven, seven. They really might make it the next one. I want to see this mass. I want to see the France team devolve into a brilliant psychosexual drama again. Um, I
It
want to
has
see.
been 2 years since the last one, in fairness.
Oh, absolutely, I want to see it because they're fielding a striker who's got a year probation for fucking blackmailing a teammate with a sex tape,
But
alongside
he
him.
won the Ballon d'Or now, so it's fine.
Yeah, he got the Ballon d'Or, so all is
Yeah.
forgiven.
All's forgiven, yeah.
Alongside Mbappe, a man with an ego that's actually threatening to collapse in on itself like a neutron star. That's what I want to
Hmm.
be talking about. All of that is what I want to be talking about. I don't want to be talking about any of the shit. And it's
Hmm.
not. I won't. It's unfortunate because it's there.
Well,
Uh,
here's the devil's advocate to that, and I've been seeing this a lot. Like it's very evident the kind of misinformation that has been, shall we say, developing, especially online, where you see people, and again, this comes to a regional, the location kind of oriented thing as well, where like us Westerners have a sort of view on what like a democracy and how countries should rule and would look like. And I mean, again, England are a constitutional monarchy. It's not as if they can talk about kings and queens with any sort of moral fiber themselves. But there is a difference between having, say, figureheads in charge of your government, and then having crown princes and emirs and other people of those statures who are actively encouraging the slaughtering of poor men, essentially to fund a what is perhaps the biggest vanity project in human history. This is purely vanity. This is purely to get noticed, and this is purely to be accepted in a wider community. But that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to get accepted with people who are in power. Like there's been some fantastic deep dives done in the last couple of weeks, especially from actually the Netflix special FIFA Uncovered have done this very well, going into how the Qatari World Cup was on. But also, I'd give a shout out to Tifo Football, who done a very good piece on how essentially a lot of the geopolitical reasons comes about for this World Cup to happen in Qatar. And again, none of these reasons to be in World Cup are football oriented. This is what we need to specify here. You can explain away the Brazilian World Cup because Brazil are the best footballing nation in the world, you could argue. It makes sense for them to have hosted a World Cup at some stage. But again, that was laced in controversy as well because a lot of the stadia used to in this competition are now derelict, and half it was used to destroy the Amazon. So it was an environmental disaster to call the Brazilian World Cup anything like that. We mentioned Russia before as well, and how that kind of became a bit of an advertisement for the Putin regime, and how he would end up using that kind of advantage in a couple of years' time. This feels different because you know the mitigating circumstances into this. You know for a fact that Qatar is not a footballing power horse. They're not even the best team in Asia. You could probably say Iran is that, realistically. In fact, everything like hell, like a country mile, Iran are the best team in Asia. So you look at in the Arab Asia, I should specify there. Um, so you can't even say that there's a footballing reason for them to win the World Cup. There is absolutely none. It is down to money. It is down to bribery. It's down to like barefaced corruption to the point where, well, football I think has been generally being going away from the fan anyway. This is the ultimate slap in the face of the fan to be said to say, well, look, we're going to do a World Cup in the middle of a season. You have no control over it. The players have no control over it. Incidentally, they're just as much of a passengers of this as well. So they're being like emotionally held hostage to the idea of winning a World Cup, but it might destroy your body in doing so. But then again, a lot of bodies have been destroyed in the process of this World Cup. So what's one more footballer, I suppose.
They at least
Um,
get to go home.
yeah, that's true. They actually have rights, which is something a lot of people in Qatar don't have. And
Mhm.
again, it's that anti-fan kind of attitude I have because I've not I have, but I've seen to the fact where even if you go to Qatar to support your country, you're not safe. And let's be completely honest about that. If you're gay or lesbian, bisexual or trans, there's no guarantee you're going to leave the country. Like I
That's
don't
two World Cup. This will be the second World Cup in a row where, like, if you're an LGBTQI fan,
yeah.
um, they've just like, nah, we don't really give too much of a shit about you. Actually, we don't give any kind of a shit about you.
Hmm.
You know,
Like the fan zones, I think are genuinely appalling to look at. The hotels are not for fans. The fan zones are not designed for fans either. They're designed for corporate tickets. Like that. Like the is anyone in the going to be even attending the matches outside of paid fans, obviously, which I think is another layer on top of this as well. There's actually just been so much about this World Cup that I despised. I don't actually know where to start. Like it's genuinely the most contemptible competition I think I've ever had, and this is after we've ranted about the Super League. Like this
yeah,
is
I
so
mean,
much worse than the Super League.
it's awful. Like, well, the Super League could be stopped. We can't stop this. I
Very
mean, like,
true.
it's a great quote from Matt Miller, who was a former spokesman for the DOJ. He was part of the delegation that North American sent for the 2022. And he said the quote is the whole idea of holding a tournament in the desert in the summer in outdoor stadia that would be cooled using air conditioning technology that has not yet been invented was so obviously
Hmm.
fantastical that it's hard for me to believe anybody ever bought it in the first place.
Yeah.
So as I said, like when the bid was initially accepted, it was going to take place in the summer. They're like, yeah, we'll just air cool the stadia. I was like, oh hell, we'll just use air conditioners, air conditioning. I was like, how it can't do that. Oh, we'll just make ones that do. Really? Okay then. And you're just going, what the fuck? That's just
Hmm.
insane. Like, um, and then when you look at the electorate of FIFA in the years following the vote, so
Hmm.
many bans, extradition orders, guilty pleas, indictments, convictions. Like,
Yeah.
it's fucking crazy. Like,
Hmm.
and that's just the
It's
thing.
appalling.
And then they turn around and go, "Well, we didn't buy any of the votes. There was no vote buying." I was like, "Oh, really? So it just so happened that all the people who voted for you are all now criminals? Oh, literally, they're all fucking most of them are fucking criminals." Um,
I did have to laugh because in that Netflix special, the kind of the chief organizer for the Qatari bid
oh, was that the
comes on
UEFA Uncovered or the FIFA Uncovered or
FIFA
something like that?
Uncovered. Yeah, it is
Yeah, I
quite
haven't
good, but
watched that. Yeah, like
yeah.
I got rid of my Netflix there a couple of months back. But my God, like our Spog's been talking about that quite emphatically,
Hmm.
and it sounds so fucking good
But
slash bad. You know what I mean?
in a mad sense, like anything that's kind of uncovered is stuff that you know about already. It's just now in context. It's focused in on the Qatari lens. It's kind of directing its ire and its frustration, the fact that this is now the tip of the corruption iceberg, and you'd hope this is as bad as it gets. And that's the thing. Like, if there's anything positive you could say about this World Cup, is that it couldn't possibly get any more corrupt than this. Like, surely we reached the there. It cannot get any worse than 6,500 people dying just so you can have a couple of stadiums in the middle of nowhere. And again, I hate using generalizations like that. I know it's very cute, it's very unpleasant for me to say that, but it is a small island in the middle of nowhere. It's like having Munster or Manchester hosting the World Cup. It's ludicrous. Like that. Even I know that's preposterous. Kind of way. Um, so from that point of view, FIFA Uncovered do a very good job of contextualizing how that World Cup comes about. Um, but any information isn't necessarily new. The kind of way. It's just stuff that you know already. It's just presented in a way that kind of now kind of chains things together. And the person that is the actual ambassador, if you will, or the person kind of running the bid, um, goes for the tired explanation that like, and I was even watching this and I was going like, I know what he's going to do now. He's going to play for the PR playbook, and literally as I just said the word racist, and he says the phrase racist 5 seconds later. He accuses people of criticizing the campaign as racist. It's like, fuck you. Like, honestly, and this has been a playbook again that we've seen very recently from the Manchester City owners, against Jurgen Klopp, like basically implying that he's racist because he's called out the three state-backed clubs in Europe. Like, I'm sorry that like you're on the personal attack and we're not loving you as much as our politicians are, but you can't buy our love. That's just not how it work now. How it goes. You can't just you're not going to put on a great tournament supposedly without us seeing the dead bodies at the bottom of the stadium. Like we notice these things. That's why we have journalists. That's why we have a free press. And even recently, we've seen footage of like of Danish media being stopped in the middle of a live broadcast because they're not allowed to film Qataris. It's like, yes, they are. They're free press. If you want to bring a whole lot of people into the country, you're going to have to, bend your archaic rules to suit them. You can't just bring the world's press in and expect them to all obey your rules. It just doesn't work that way. You know, it's a world competition. It's not about Qatar. You are the hosts of a World Cup. You're the custodians of the greatest tournament in the world. It ultimately has nothing to do with you, and this is where the disillusion starts, because this is an exercise of what they call soft power. It's a regime showing their more benevolent side, in the same way that Russia did the same way, and 4 years later they're attacking Ukraine, a sovereign nation. Qatar will do this to flex their muscle financially and militarily, because there's a lot of deals under the table with other countries that suit this World Cup. And if you go into FIFA Uncovered, there's a lot of very unpleasant reports and claims that the French government propped up their side of the bid because they had a deal going on with their military and Qatar. And lo and behold, a couple of months later, PSG gets bought out by the Qatari royal family. Totally coincidence. Total coincidence, I'm sure. But that's an example of how bad this rabbit hole gets. It's a very rotten, it's a very stenchy rabbit hole, and as uncomfortable as it is, we still had to go through it. Because I'm even thinking to myself here, Neil, like, as football fans, you have two choices. Either you just bury your head in the sand and just watch the football, enjoy it as just that, or you have to look around and read the room and eventually say that this is not the sport you grew up following. This is not the same thing that has hold the same kind of like romance and love that you had as a kid. This is now something grotesque. It's a very unpleasant facsimile. Um, Almost like it's masquerading as football. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but much like you said, stated as well, like decades ago, like, you had fascist regimes hosting the fucking World
Hmm.
Cup, you know.
Yeah, it's a tactic by team
So
by regimes like this to look more pleasant, more nice,
yeah,
essentially.
exactly. So I don't know. It's just it's weird. I again, like I said, I'm gonna, I am ultimately going to watch this
Hmm.
because the sound kind of real wishy-washy or real cop-outy, but it isn't my fault that it's being
It
hosted in
isn't, and that's
Qatar.
the thing. You can't blame fans on this. Like,
You know,
if anyone is to blame, it's FIFA. It's the people in charge that gave them the bid in the first place.
it's FIFA. It's people gave him the charge. Um, when it was when it was moved to a Winter World Cup because the domestic leagues didn't actually kick up much of a fuss.
Mm.
No, I'm like I don't recall the FA even saying anything about it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not really. I don't recall any of the other leagues saying a tremendous amount about. Uh, oh, by the way, from like mid-November to
Mm.
almost January, we're gonna have all of your players in the middle of a desert. You know, um, and you know, silence can be bought, and I reckon a fair amount of cash was going here. Don't kick up too much of a fuss. Here's a huge amount of zeros.
Yeah.
um, so it was just absolutely, it was absolutely fucking crazy. Like um, so yeah, it's weird. Like you can be both. You can watch this and still be appalled at it. You know,
Mm.
that's what I think. You can watch it for the footballing. There is going to be a good bit of a spectacle. I'm like, it's got every potential now to completely blow up and be a complete fire festival of a fucking disaster.
It does look to have that potential. Yes.
When you consider like, as of last month, these gigantic fucking fan villages, purpose built, which are just nothing but tents or mobile homes. Like they're basically
Yeah.
shipping containers with doors on them. As of last month, they're still being built. You know,
Hmm.
um, despite the fact that when they initially made the bid, they specifically stated that there would be no floating cruise ships to house passengers. There's now three of them.
Yeah.
So they're gonna house like 6,000 guests. In the bay basically, because the bay is recently because Qatar until quite recently has actually been blockaded by the three countries around it, by Bahrain,
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So it's quite young. Some people say, oh, name a city other than Doha in Qatar. They can't really because there isn't any. You know,
Yeah.
there are host cities that are in like exclamation marks. They're all in quotation marks because the cities actually didn't exist, just being specifically built for this. You know,
Yeah.
which is fucking crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So yeah, I'm like you can, and then there's all the horrendous human rights abuses and deaths that have occurred as a direct result of this, not indirect, not this would
Hmm.
happen anyway, or whatever shit. No, these people died specifically to put this tournament on.
Mm.
So I think you can criticize all of that. You can be appalled, offended, horrified, all of the above, whatever adjective you choose,
Mm.
um, by all that, and still watch it and not, let's say, shall I feel guilty, but not like go, oh, I am a part of this. You can watch it and go, well, I am contributing to this. It was like this is happening anyway. Um,
Mm. Yeah. It was going to happen regardless of your contribution.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, it's just it's weird. We can talk about both. When we do this podcast and when we go through the group stages and all the stuff, we can go through all the teams and what they're actually doing to highlight these issues. The Aussie team did a really brilliant
Yeah.
video. The Danish team now have put up such a fight that like the reporters from their country are being attacked by guards almost in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's just how it is. We can do both. We can talk about both. You know.
And that's the thing. Like, I think in a weird way, I think it was actually Barney Ronay who has done stellar work as ever as a football writer. Actually, made the very good point. Now, this is more so on the racism route that Manchester City kicked up with Jurgen Klopp, but it does extend to the Qatari World Cup. In fact, like let's face it, anything state sponsored is gonna like start the conversation. But if they are gonna use accusations like that, then they're gonna have a more of a focus on them because the burden of proof is on them to show that they uh can be accepted on a wider scale. Like there aren't just like the kind of the archaic draconian laws against gay people, against trans people, against women. Let's be honest, because it's 2022 and we're still talking about women getting stoned for infidelity.
Mm.
This is the sort of stuff we're talking about. And again, I understand that like that other countries are going to be slower to develop and change over time. Like we're seeing what's happening in Iran, which is a revolution led by women essentially, and not even that, but
Yeah,
it's led by a
people
generation.
are getting the death penalty for
Yeah,
protesting
the
over
death
there.
penalty, but that is the power, that is the people trying to lead a revolution, and that should be admired and encouraged because that's how change happens. It's not going to happen overnight in Qatar, no doubt. That's 100% certain. What you'd like to say, and again, this is me being purely optimistic, is that enough voices are being heard that some level of change happens. Now, again, I'm a Formula One fan and a WWE fan, and in both sports, I say sport for WWE, you get what I mean. In both of those, there's so much sports washing going on that I'm almost immune to it in a sense. I've just accepted it. The season always starts in Bahrain, and there's always humanitarian protests happening outside the race. It happens every year, and people just ignore it. The second race happens in Saudi Arabia, in the beautiful city of Jeddah, where the street circuit is a literal death trap. And if you don't go, if you go slightly left or right, you're probably going to hit into a concrete wall, which normally aren't used on race circuits, but apparently it's all they can manage in Saudi Arabia. In on the WWE side, they do at least one or two shows in Saudi Arabia at 10 million a head. And it's always in Jeddah, and the crowds are always fantastic, and they're cheering through everything because no doubt they're told to cheer or else. And it's
They
just
call that like the Crown Royal or the Crown.
the crown jewel. It's always called, yeah, crown jewel show. And they always bring out the celebrities. They always put an effort in. They always get the big bucks. And this is commonplace. This is now the standard for a lot of sports here, and football is just catching up now. Again, Formula One for a long time was hosting races in Russia, and every time Putin was coming in to hand the trophy over, the camera would cut to him arriving as opposed to the fucking race. Like this is standard. This is not new in any stretch of imagination. It just hurts when it gets to a stage where it's so blatant and so obvious. And as you said very well there, Neil, like our input doesn't matter. Like no matter if you watch it or don't watch it, the World Cup is still going to happen. So you might as well see what's happened. Your curiosity is going to get the better of you because, like I said, as a purely from a purely footballing oriented way mindset, there are interesting stories to follow. There are narratives. There are things to see here. It's just a shame that it's in Qatar. That if anything historic does happen, the actual stigma of the World Cup is going to follow. I don't think it's going to be the PR success that Qatar hope it is, and I sincerely hope that the people continue to speak up about it. The fact that there are journalists in Qatar now going to try and do their job under the immense pressure of whatever people they have around trying to deter themselves from putting out articles like this because they've been told you should have freedom. They'll be told you'll be allowed to say what you want. You'll be allowed to be honest. But we know realistically, like that's not guaranteed. That there could be horror stories for journalists. There could be issues there, and not even that, but like on the topic of gay fans, they said they have protection for gay football fans arriving into the country, but Qataris who are gay are being persecuted even more for basically exposing themselves to be gay,
Mm.
which I think is preposterous. But like I said, like the fact that that's being drawn to, and we are aware of it, I think is one thing. It's just a shame that this hasn't been nipped in the bud before. But like I said, this is a 12-year process. You'd like to think someone would have kind of raised a caution already, but that's not the case. It's now more so for us to be comfortable with it than anything else. Um, and depending on who you are, whether you are or not, is entirely up to you. Um,
I don't think it's entirely possible to be comfortable with this.
it's not,
You
not
know,
at all. No.
I've kind of given up that lofty ambition of just simply being
Mm,
comfortable with this
yeah,
quite a while ago. But yeah, no, it's just I suppose the thing is, I suppose the aim is to consume ethically. Uh,
yeah,
you know,
or try and improve like as much as you can be consume it, like because it's not possible to get to completely 100% consume it because that's not going to be the case. I think it's important to have the context. I think it'd be a fair way of saying it, wouldn't it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Everything needs context.
Yeah, and this
It's
is
that
this is certainly a work.
it's that context which is the exact thing they're trying to sponge out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, unfortunately, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in the competition itself. But in our next video, we're actually going to do our a full preview of the World Cup.
Hmm.
So stay tuned for that if you can. I suppose we could all do with some cheering up. So maybe get some chocolate for the next part. You know.
Yeah, probably.